From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review it. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. We have moved into May. Like I said last week, Justin Timberlake voice. It's an interesting month in the sports calendar. College baseball is heating up. LSU tough loss this weekend. You're starting to see the wheels turn with the draft being over, and now all these teams moving into their offseason conditioning programs, which have started. Then the football phase comes in this week, obviously, with the Saints having their rookie minicamp this week. So that'll be the first chance we get to see some of these rookies out here for their little freshman orientation, I guess you could call it. And then they have, obviously, OTAs beginning, was it next week or the week after that? I think the 22nd is the first day for Saints OTAs. So we are moving right along. Before you know it, July is going to be here, and when it's late July, that's when the training camp starts. So today, we got an interesting topic, but before we get into that, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling a bit nostalgic as we look around at this.
Very important day today.
Brick, we got the wood, the audio setup. Assuming everything goes right, you may not see this again because coming up on Wednesday, we may have something new for you.
This could very well be, if you love this podcast. It's a nice, cozy little podcast room that we created here. This probably as our last one in this room. So sad day, but we'll be moving on to some different things in the new Fox 8 studios, which we are scheduled to go live with on Wednesday. So you can do the math. Our next podcast is on Wednesday, so that's when it's supposed to be. So strong chance this is the last podcast in this room. You can't see it, but the ceilings are falling down right now, so it's probably time for a little
quite
update.
Literally falling apart.
Yeah, so we'll have to say goodbye to an old friend. All right, how was your weekend?
Weekend was good, real chill. Went to a baby shower with the wife, all of that. So real relaxing weekend.
Mine was not chill. I went to Biloxi this weekend for both my kids' cheerleading competition. They're in competition cheer. Very competitive. Very expensive, and it's very a couple of long days. They both performed Saturday and Sunday, but it was worth it. Both teams won grand championships.
There you go.
So they got rings, they got jackets. Yeah. So I am proud of the Royal Athletics team out of Belchase doing big things in Biloxi this weekend. All right, so it's Monday, new day, new week. Hope you're enjoying it. Cinco de Mayo, depending on when you watch this. Andre, we got I wanted to go here today with this podcast because every now and then you'll have these slight little lulls in the action. And when we get that, to me, it's always a good time to just kind of reflect and just reassess the situation. And we did that today. Both of us did with the Saints roster. Okay, we got all these, free agents and draft picks and undrafted free agents. It's a lot of moving parts, but sometimes you just write the roster out, and then you just kind of take a look at the strengths and the weaknesses, and that's where we want to go with the big picture here today.
Right. We've gotten through the meat of the free agency. We've made it through the NFL draft and everything that comes with that. So now as you take a step back and you look at the Saints team roster as it is currently constructed, we are going to break down their top 5 positions. Not positions in need. We're talking about the top 5 positions, what position group we think is the best. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're including offensive line as one position. We're not doing like left tackle, left guard, center, edge rushers and defensive ends. That's one. Interior defensive line. That's a separate one as well. Safeties, corners, all that stuff. So we're going to dive into that, count our way up, starting at number 5. Sean, what you got?
Yeah, well, first off, this was difficult.
This was like
he and I were talking before the show. Like, when you really put the pen to the paper and really look at the roster, it was hard to rank these. Because you want to look at the talent in the room, you want to look at the depth in the room. So if you were going deepest, it could tilt the score one way. If you were going to go, top in talent, it could tip the scales another direction. So we're going to go our top 5. I'm going to start with 5. My number 5 group was the running back room. Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Jordan Mims, Vilas Jones Jr., is that correct? Draft pick Devin Neal, Valaday, and undrafted free agent Yarns out of, was it Delaware, that we spoke about last week on the undrafted section of our Saints podcast. So why did I go 5 here? I put this over the wide receiver room. Alvin Kamara is obviously still, to me, a top 2 or 3 player on the roster, if not top 1. He might be their best overall player on the roster. And if you can get anything out of Devin Neal, I think you can add. I think it's a spot where you can really grow in this room and add some production. If you add some production to this room, you can really add to your offense as a whole, which, as we know, could help tilt the scales when it comes to wins and losses. Kendre Miller, not quite a lost cause, but he's probably on his last opportunity. But if he does figure it out, that makes the room that much stronger. I've already told you I like the undrafted rookie. Jordan Mims is a guy that can give you some snaps here and there. I don't know if he makes the final roster. Vilas Jones Jr. is a running back wide receiver hybrid, but he's going to be a running back with the Saints. So for all those reasons, running back cracks my top 5 at the number 5 slot. What you got?
I also thought about receiver, but I couldn't put it there because if you ask most people what the biggest need is, they're going to say a wide receiver, and there's just not enough versatility when it comes to different skill sets in that room. So I had to leave receiver off as well. I went defense with my number 5, defensive tackle, and that interior defensive line to be specific. And I was going back and forth with them in a couple other position groups, but they made the list for me because of their depth. I love their depth. This is arguably the deepest position on the entire roster when you look at Brian Brzee, Devon Godshaw, Colin Saunders is back, Nathan Shepard is back. They just drafted Vernon Broughton, the rookie, in the 3rd round. So it's a lot of guys in that interior defensive line, a defensive line that has struggled to stop the run in the past. I think they should be better at that this coming season. By the way, one of the names I just mentioned, Brian Brzee, you can make an argument that he's your best player on defense now. Yeah. We looked for Brian Brzee last year in his sophomore season to take a big jump. He made that jump. I like Vernon Broughton. I like the depth. So the defensive tackle position comes in at my number 5.
Okay. I might have that on my list too, but maybe not at 5. All right, what's next? Number 4?
Number 4.
All right, number 4. Interesting. I kind of went back and forth. I almost flip-flopped 3 and 4. But you'll see why it would ultimately broke the tie. I went linebacker at number 4, okay? Demario Davis is still Demario Davis. He still has those games where he just takes over and he's just the best and smartest defender on the field by a mile. So I think even though he's 35 years of age, I think he's got enough for one more quality year in the tank for the Saints. I've always liked Werner as a number 2. I thought he's a smart, steady player. I think he's got good instincts. He gets a little in trouble sometimes when he tries to go around blocks as opposed to staying disciplined and staying in his lane. Sometimes he gets caught trying to make the big TFL as opposed to, running with the play and making a play. But I think overall, that's been a good tandem, Demario Davis and Pete Werner, especially when we've talked about past draft picks where they haven't necessarily panned out.
Yeah, in
those smaller draft classes. But I think Pete Werner was one of the ones that has, and that's why, obviously, he was able to get that contract extension last year. Then you add in Stutzman, the 4th-round pick, who everyone seems to be high on, who I think his ability and his size is going to make him maybe a bigger chess piece this season. I think he's going to get on the field maybe a little more than perhaps people realize this season. So if he is your 3rd guy, I think that's a huge upgrade. This can go back to when Caden Ellis was the 3rd guy, and I thought that he brought immense value and immense production to that linebacker room. You also have Anthony Orji, Jalen Ford, the pick, was it 5th-round pick last year, 6th-round pick last year. Nephi Sewell is a name that certainly he's made plays, but he's been hurt. Stallbird and DeMarco Jackson, who I think is going to have to battle to make the roster. But I think when you add up the score here, I'm liking the linebacker room more after the draft, even though I don't think it's an elite room. I think it's a room that can be better than what they were a season ago.
Linebacker's also my 4.
Okay.
So I'm right here with you for a lot of the reasons that you said. I think you have 2 quality starters in Demario Davis and Pete Werner. You do not have to worry about your starting linebackers. I like the Danny Stutzman pick, like you mentioned. And this is what I'll say when it comes to linebacker. Don't overlook this room. And most importantly, don't overlook the impact that a new defensive coordinator can have on this room. Because
especially in this system.
We saw Zach Bond, a guy who was buried on the Saints depth chart, go to a new team, new defense, new system, new defensive coordinator. And in his first year in Philadelphia, he's a first-team All-Pro and a Super Bowl champion. Dennis Allen wasn't able to get the best out of Zach Bond. He goes to Philadelphia. They are able to get the best out of Zach Bond. So now you look at this linebacker room. You've got a couple names who haven't been able to necessarily break out and make a huge impact. You named some of them. DeMarco Jackson, Anthony Orji, Jalen Ford, who spent a good amount of time hurt last year as a rookie, Nephi Sewell. But you bring in Brandon Staley, who's expected to bring in a new system along with him, a new name, a new voice, a new mentality, mindset, strategy.
New responsibilities,
Exactly.
too.
All of that could help one of these guys. So right now they're number 4, but I'm not, that this is my sleeper room. This is my X factor, my dark horse room in the defense, because I think that a new defensive coordinator could potentially elevate some of these guys. And hopefully one of those guys is Pete Werner. Because Pete Werner's another guy who you mentioned you like him as a 2.
Yeah.
I don't think either of us can see him as a 1 right now.
Not right now.
If he had to do what DeMario Davis is doing, we might be a little concerned. So hopefully he helps another young guy in Pete Werner take that leap as well.
And look, this is a 3-4 defense. 3-4 defenses are more linebacker centric just because the edge defender isn't technically an outside linebacker. And there are different things the linebacker has to do when your line up front is playing different techniques. So, and look, Brandon Staley is his mentor is Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio just did what the player you're talking about. Vic Fangio was his defensive coordinator, Zach Bond.
Yep.
So I think there's something there. I think there's some. This is the position group that you see it on offense sometimes with a new scheme, what it highlights. But I think a position group with this type of scheme change and this sort of vision with the new defensive coordinator, I think is going to make a big difference. And I think it's going to be a little more relied upon, I think. Not that it wasn't. That's hard to say. I don't want to say that. But it's like I said, it's just a linebacker-centric style. I mean, just think of the Dome Patrol. We got the poster right there. You can't see it, but there. I mean, it was. What did you know about the 3-4 defense back then with the Dome Patrol? The linebackers. So it's a linebacker-centric defense. So I'm very curious about this room. I like the makeup. So we agree. Linebacker number 4.
Number
All right,
4.
what's next? Number 3?
Number 3, what we got?
All right. I don't love this room, but they've got so many bodies. And somebody's got to hit, right? Somebody's got to hit an edge defender. Somebody's got to hit a defensive end. You got Carl Granderson. You got Foskey, you got Chase Young, you got Cam Jordan, you got Jonah Williams, you got Chris Rump. You brought in, it looks just like 2 undrafted free agents, and you also have Fadil Diggs. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 9 guys. You're not going to keep all 9. And I know this group has ultimately underachieved. Other than maybe, who would you say hasn't? I mean, look,
Carl
Jordan
Granderson, probably.
Granderson has not. He's probably overachieved.
Yeah.
Chase Young was probably just under my expectation last year. I don't think he was a bust, though. I think he did enough. Foskey's been obviously MIA.
Yeah.
And then there's the stand-up edge, and then there's the defensive end, the Cam Jordan. So we combine these two. Again, this is another scheme change that could certainly benefit certain players. I don't know if there's a guarantee prototype at that edge spot that is a guarantee to be productive in this new system, but clearly they have some faith in Chase Young, or they wouldn't have given him that money.
Yeah.
Chase Young has said that when they went to different packages, and this is true, this DA's third down package, you saw a lot of guys standing up on the edge. Sometimes the alignment was a little offset, a little bit lopsided, but I do think there was at least enough to where they were able to see at a pretty bargain rate. $17 million for an edge pass rusher is not that much when you talk about just that position in the NFL. It's just highly, highly coveted. So while I don't love this pick, I think it's also a reflection of just how unsure I am in other spots to put this at number 3. So I gotta go at number 3, edge defender, defensive end for the Saints.
Yeah, that's the one where I was looking at number 5. I was going back and forth between defensive tackle and defensive end / edge, and I went with defensive tackle for this reason: depth. I don't like the depth at defensive end right now. That's why one of the reasons why I was huge on Jalen Walker in the first round, potentially for the New Orleans Saints. He potentially could have been a day one starter on that defensive line on the outside as a pass rusher, but you don't go him. You look at the defensive ends, you've got, say, Chase Young on one side, Carl Granderson on the other side, Cam Jordan mixing in, getting in where he fits in. Is there any other reliable name who you can say for sure, like, oh, yeah, he can come in and give you good production? So that's kind of why I leaned a little closer to the defensive tackle, which takes me to my number 3. Staying on defense, this time we're going to the secondary. I'm going to go with the safeties.
I thought about it, yeah.
The safeties because, number one, the Justin Reed edition, that's the biggest move that they've made this entire offseason. Justin Reed is a quality safety. You can put him at that spot, and you don't have to worry about it because Justin Reed will hold it down up there. Now, Tyrann Mathieu, we know he's closer to the end than he is the beginning of his career. Nonetheless, he's been relatively productive compared to the other guys on the defense. He's been here for 3 seasons. In each of those 3 seasons, he's led the Saints in interceptions.
He still does what he does, you know?
Exactly. And there are some times where, maybe you can see that age pop up. I remember when the Bengals came here and Jamar Chase made that catch and juked Tyrann Mathieu. You were like, oh, man, there's a little bit of that age. But still, at this age, he's still making big plays. He's still out there. So the duo of Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reed in the secondary, I like it a lot. What I will say is, at first, when I made this list, safety was my number 1. I moved it a few spots down for the same reason that I mentioned earlier, depth. I need to see more depth out of that safety room, and that's part of the reason why you brought in a Justin Reed is because you've been waiting for somebody to take that next step, especially at that free safety position, and you haven't necessarily seen it. Now, you did draft a rookie at safety. We'll see how he does. You've got some young players at safety. We'll see how they develop because they're also, just like the linebacker room, getting to work under a new defensive coordinator. So maybe some of those depth pieces will start to rise to the top, but when you look at their starters, I think they've got 2 quality starters in Tyrann and Justin Reed.
And they also have Jonas Sanker, the rookie.
Right.
Davison, an undrafted free agent. I forgot about Ugo Amadi. He's listed as a safety. He's probably more of a nickel. Miller Bradford, and the drafted from a couple years ago.
I couldn't remember.
Is it Howden?
Yeah, Jordan Howden.
Yeah, I forgot about him. So at least he's got some experience. That's not a terrible pick. Well, you had him 3rd?
Yeah, I have him 3rd.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. It's hard to gauge depth at safety just because it's a little bit of a hybrid position. So it's like, okay, who's the true backup? Who's the true starter in those type of situations?
Right.
Like Amadi, is he really a safety? So, yeah, I can go with that. All right, what's next? 2?
Number 2, what we got?
All right, my number 2 was your number 5. I love the D-tackle room. I love defensive tackle. I mean, I think you have high-end playmaking. I think you've got veteran depth, and you've got young up-and-comers that are hungry. I think you got Brian Brzee, who I think is entering the prime of his career right now. I'm very curious to see how he truly lines up in the scheme change. Is he over the center, or is he in between the nose tackle and the stand-up edge at the technically defensive end position, but it's really a defensive tackle? I think Brian Brzee, I mean, right now he's a guy that gets up the field and sacks the quarterback from the interior. That's a huge skill to have. Now, is the scheme impacted by... Does that impact his production? Because look, 3-4 interior guys are asked to do a lot of dirty work. So that's something. Devon Godshaw, I think he was brought here for one reason only, to stop the run. They needed a true nose that could stop the run. He can do that. Colin Saunders, another one. How well has he adjusted to the new scheme? But he's played a lot of football and he's made some big plays for the Saints. Nathan Shepard is a veteran. He's been around for a long time. This is a veteran depth guy. And then you talk about John Ridgeway, who they got in a trade, who's a rotational guy. But again, if this is your 4th or 5th D tackle, that shows it's a pretty deep room. Christian Boyd, the draft pick from last year, got on the field a little bit. We'll see if he grows in year 2. And then obviously you drafted Vernon Broughton. That's how you say his name?
Yeah.
The guy who was coached by the Texas product that was coached by Bo Davis, Saints now defensive line coach. So when I look at D tackle, I'm not convinced on the edges. For as much as I'm not convinced on the edges, I'd be disappointed this group does not show some growth from last year to this year. Because last year, they were like getting bulldozed at the line of scrimmage. If you are 3 pillars up front, or if you are heavier, however you view the D tackle DN split in this new 3-4 scheme, if you have those concrete blocks up front that are able to take on blocks and allow those linebackers to roam and make tackles, I think that can be huge in terms of you were down here a season ago, catapult all the way up here this season, which again has an impact on wins and losses. So I think the defensive tackle position, to me, probably the deepest position on the roster, and in my opinion, the second best group overall on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, with the depth part for sure. That's part of the reason why they made it on my list. And I almost talked myself into jumping them over linebacker and safety, but I had shifted things around so much. I left them at 5, but I can certainly see them being that high. Now, speaking of a group that's high, that's in the trenches, I'm finally going to the offense. Give me the offensive line for my number 2. I took a little heat in the comments for saying a few weeks ago that the offensive line is stable. I thought they were stable then. I think now they're a pretty good offensive line. You've got Taliese Fuaga at left tackle coming off a good rookie year. You've got Eric McCoy, a really good player in the middle of that offensive line at center. And we saw what his impact was when he was on and off the field last year. You've got Cesar Ruiz at right guard. You've got, you assume it'll be Kelvin Banks Jr. at right tackle, or maybe even flip him and Fuaga left and right, however you want to do that. You've got a lot of depth and competition, including Dylan Ray Duns, who they signed in the free agency at left guard. So you've got at least 3 or 4 quality starters on that offensive line. And now, if Kelvin Banks Jr. is able to take the starting spot from Trevor Penning, you've got Trevor Penning, a guy who gave you really some pretty good production.
He's over
last
20
year.
starts in his career, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got him as your backup. You also signed Will Clapp. So I think you've got some depth in that offensive line now, which you didn't have last season. I think you've got some quality starters because you've invested back-to-back first-round draft picks on tackles. So right now, I think the offensive line is one of the best positions that the Saints have.
Correction. It's the best. That's why I put it number 1. And my number 1 is offensive line. Look, first off, my 1, 2, 3 are O-line, D-tackle, and the edge. I mean, that's what they want. They want the trenches to be the where they win games, how they are built. And I know there's some question marks about how good they're going to be, but when you stack this room up against other rooms on the roster, to me, this is number 1. I mean, you brought in one of the safest, cleanest picks in the draft that I would think would be hugely disappointed if he is not a day 1 starter in Kelvin Banks. You got Eric McCoy, rock solid. You got Cesar Ruiz, solid starter. The left guard spot is still to be determined, but it's either going to be Reduns, a Penning. I guess you can throw Sal DeVeri in that mix. I doubt it, but you've got some options to at least compete, and you've got some guys that have started a lot of games. And then the right tackle, is it Fuaga or is it Penning? How do they mix and match there? But Fuaga was rock solid last year. Then whoever doesn't win, like you said, if it's Penning being the 6th guy, I'm fine with that. I am perfectly fine with that. I know it's disappointing because he was a first-round pick, but I think as a starter, if it's not there, if he's not the best 5, so be it. But as a depth guy, I think it's fantastic. Then you bring in Will Clapp, who is so comfortable in his own skin as a veteran reserve offensive lineman with several quality starts to his name. Landon Young, who's been a very versatile backup, who, again, embraces it. It's hard to find those types of guys. And you got Kyle Herger, Simpkins, who is an undrafted free agent, Kilty, who was an undrafted free agent, and then last year's 7th-round pick, Josiah Ezerim. I look at this room, that's 13 guys. They'll probably keep 9, and then 1 or 2 in the practice squad. I look at this room, and I look at the quarterback room, running back room, D-tackle, all these other rooms. I'm like, talent, depth, and from where they were last year, where they had talent but no depth, I think they basically fixed their biggest vulnerability a season ago with offensive line depth, which is very hard to find in the NFL. No team is comfortable with their depth on the offensive line. There aren't enough roster spots and aren't that many big men walking the earth. So for me, my number 1, offensive line. What about you?
I like the O-line a lot. That's why I had him at 2. But for my number 1, I'm going to go with the guys who the offensive line is blocking for.
Okay.
Not talking about the quarterbacks. Let's go running back. And the reason I went running back, the number 1 reason, that's the position that your best player plays. Alvin Kamara is your best offensive player. You could argue he's the best player on the entire team right now. That's the position he plays. And I think he's got a good amount of depth behind him right now. when Kendre Miller was able to stay on the football field, you saw some flashes of him being able to be an effective running back. Devin Neal, I like what he brings, the 5th-round draft pick out of Kansas. And when I look at those three in particular, there are other guys, but those three in particular, they all have a versatile skill set. They can run the ball. They can catch the ball. If the New Orleans Saints have a good offense next year, if the New Orleans Saints win 9 to 10 games next year, I don't think it'll be because Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler or Derek Carr threw for 4,600 yards and 45 touchdowns. I think it's because you were able to run the ball consistently and have your running backs have an impact on the game. So when I look at that, when I look at the impact that Kellen Moore's running back had last year in Saquon Barkley. Now, there's no Saquon on this roster, but like I mentioned, Alvin Kamara is the best player you got, and he plays running back. So off of that alone, I gave running back my number 1. Full transparency, they started at number 4 on my list. And as I started to write out the reasoning, I was like, from 4 to 3, 3 to 2, and I wound up with them at 1. So I'm going running back as the Saints' best position.
Who was your number 1 group outside of the top 5?
That's where I probably put receiver.
Yeah, I had receiver at 6. It's funny, I didn't have safety, but now that I think about it, I kind of like safety. So, all right, so I had O-line, D-tackle, edge, linebacker, running back. You had real quick.
Running back, offensive line, safety, linebacker, and D-tackle.
All right, feel free to agree with all of that. I know you agree with both our lists, so feel free to let us know.
They agree with everything we say.
Anyway,
and they let us know in the comments.
We got through that pretty nicely. We paced that pretty quickly. All right, we only got a few seconds left. Anything you're looking forward to for rookie minicamp this weekend?
Rookie minicamp, like you said, it's kind of an orientation for these guys, so I'm looking forward to seeing Tyler Shuck get out there. I'm looking forward to seeing Broughton get out there, Kelvin Banks Jr. get out there, and really start to work, because I think a lot of these rookies can have big impacts day one.
It's going to be all Tyler Shuck.
Yeah,
everybody's going to talk about
Shuck.
all Tyler Shuck, the first time in black and gold. But I do want to see some other guys perform as well. All right. We got to get out of here. All right. For Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. Catch you guys next time on Overtime.